Hello marketer, it's Ty here bringing you another episode of Lean Mean Marketing Teams. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Brent Smart, Chief Marketing Officer of IAG, the Australian insurance giant with leading brands including NRMA and CGU. During Brent's 4 years with IAG, he has helped NRMA Insurance climb the ranks from 36th strongest brand in Australia to the 3rd strongest brand in the country and the strongest insurance brand in the world. This brand strength has translated to commercial success that has seen NRMA Insurance win 3 coveted Gold Effies in the last 2 years. Previously, Brent spent 20 years in the advertising business, rising to CEO of Saatchi New York and leading the New Zealand agency of the decade, Colenso BBDO. In today's episode, we dive deep into Brent's fascinating career and unpack what he learnt from 20 years in advertising. I loved hearing some of Brent's stories, including the moment when he bravely told a client that he wanted to scrap an ad they'd already made to create an entirely new commercial just 3 weeks out from the Super Bowl. Yes, a $4 million USD Superbowl spot. And the client said yes. You'll have to tune in to hear what happened next. We also discussed why he decided to swap the sneakers for a suit and move from agency CEO to CMO. But some of the most powerful lessons in today's episode is when Brent breaks down how to foster a culture of creative risk-taking with your marketing team and how you get the best work from your agency partners by setting a high creative ambition and by buying completely. Brent also shares how he transformed the team from a totally decentralized product-led marketing team into a centralized brand-led model. You'll also discover some of the interesting roles that Brent brought in-house to strengthen the creative and strategic firepower at his disposal. So if you have any interest in building an award-winning, risk-taking, brand-led marketing team that could totally transform your marketing approach, then this is the episode for you. And P.S. if you're from an agency, you might want to suggest that your clients listen to this episode. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes, where you'll hear from leading CMOs and thought leaders about what it takes to create a high-performance marketing team. This podcast is brought to you by Growth Generators, a consulting firm that helps CMOs design and build modern marketing teams that drive growth. If you need help optimizing your marketing team, head to growthgenerators.io. Now, let's get on to the show.
So, Brent Smart, CMO at Insurance Australia Group. Welcome to the Lean Mean Marketing Teams podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, now we've met briefly at a couple of CMO events, but I'm looking forward to spending a bit more time with you today to unpack your incredible career and learn about what you've been up to at IAG. And before we kick things off then, maybe can you start with that? Give us a brief summary of your very impressive career today.
Oh, that's very kind. Yeah, look, it's been a journey, you know. So I am CMO at IAG. I've been in that role for 4 years now, and IAG is Australia's biggest general insurance company. The most famous brand is NRMA, which is only actually in 2 states of Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. So not everyone would know NRMA. We have other brands as well, CGU, SGIO, a few other brands in the stable. So it's a sort of a house of brands set up. And before that, I spent 20 years in the advertising business, and I spent 13 of those years not in Australia. So my previous job before IAG was at Saatchi New York, where I was CEO. Prior to that, I was at BBDO San Francisco for a little while, and spent about 5 years over in New Zealand at Colenso BBDO, which is an amazing agency. So yeah, it's been interesting. I've worked in different markets, and obviously 20 years in advertising, I've worked on all sorts of brands and all sorts of categories, very varied. But it's been a great ride.
Yeah, we haven't had anyone on the podcast yet with that background. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how you've translated all that knowledge from agency land into being a CMO and how that's really set you up to succeed. I know you're very creative and commercial. And yeah, I'd love to dive into the differences between managing a creative agency and creating an in-house creative team. And then lastly, how to make the most and build really strong partnerships with your extended team of agencies. I think you are uniquely placed to talk to all of that, if that sounds okay. Fantastic. Okay, so starting then with your personal experience of agency land, growing up there and then moving to an in-house CMO. Firstly, CEO of Saatchi New York, Colenso, one of, I think, agency of the decade in New Zealand. Very, very impressive career in agency land. And I imagine you would have seen some wild things and had an amazing time. But what are one or two of your most memorable moments in your illustrious agency career?
I mean, that is so hard, right? To think of two of my favorite moments. But no, two actually really do stick out. One from New Zealand when I was at Colenso, we built this incredible treehouse. Okay, so that sounds a little weird, but for Yellow Pages in New Zealand, we had this idea, which was how do we show people what you can do with Yellow Pages? Because, let's face it, Yellow Pages is hardly very relevant in a Google world, right? And so we basically challenged someone to build something quite extraordinary using just the Yellow Pages, and we documented their progress and it created great content. And they ended up building a treehouse, which was open to the public as a restaurant, a treehouse restaurant, basically. And we literally dropped a person off in the middle of a redwood forest north of Auckland with the Yellow Pages, and they had to build the whole thing and set the business up and do everything in about 12 weeks. It was amazing. So, but the moment linked to that was when the treehouse structure was finished. It was a beautiful structure. It won architectural awards and it was gorgeous. We got to dine in it before it opened to the public. So the agency went there. We went there with our partners and our families, and we had dinner in a treehouse that we built. So that was one of my favorite moments for sure. And it went on to win a stack of awards. And initially, it was super effective. It actually helped Yellow Pages in New Zealand still share of search off Google, which is unreal. So it was hugely successful. So that was great. And then the next one would be when I was in New York, working on my first Super Bowl spot, and I could do a whole podcast for you about that. And it was for Cheerios, which is a very iconic cereal brand in America. And Cheerios had never been to the Super Bowl in their 75-year history, and we took them there the first time. So you can imagine the pressure that was on for this Super Bowl spot. And we decided 3 weeks out from the Super Bowl, we had an ad shot, edited, ready to go, approved by everyone, to make a new one. So we just felt it wasn't quite good enough. And so we went and saw the client and said, look, we think we can do something better. And we think we can do it in 3 weeks. And so we went and made a new one. And anyway, it ended up being a great success. It's been named the top 50 all-time Super Bowl ads, which is such a sort of humbling thing.
Yeah.
But the best thing in terms of the moment was watching the Super Bowl ad, the first one that I sort of made and been involved in, during the Super Bowl. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Doesn't get much bigger than that, does it? And to be awarded in the top 50 is fantastic.
Absolutely. And thankfully, because what happens with the Super Bowl in America is it's $4 million for a 30-second spot, right? So it's a lot of money.
It's not cheap. Yep.
And what happens is the next day, the USA Today prints a ad meter, which basically they talk to consumers and they rank which were the best ads, which ones hit the mark and which ones didn't. And every CMO in America, basically like their job's on the line based on how they do the ad meter, right? So everyone's very nervously anticipating that command, and we did very well in the ad meter as well. So it was a great experience. It was awesome, and definitely one of my favorite moments in advertising for sure.
Oh. And Brave, how did you know that the spot wasn't quite right, and what was the inspiration for the new spot?
Yeah, look, great question. And you just know sometimes, right? Like I think the thing about any creative endeavor like advertising, it's a big leap of faith. And the amount of times in my career where I had a script where I was so sure it was a great script, but then in the process of making it, you didn't quite get the performances you thought you'd get. It doesn't quite land with the same emotion or comedy or that you thought it was going to have on paper. Happens all the time. And sometimes they just don't turn out as great as you think. And so that was the case with this Cheerios spot. We had a spot, and it was really good, and we really liked it, but it just didn't quite get to that sort of level of greatness that we were aspiring to. And the other problem too, more practical, it was a much better 60 than 30. And we were really struggling to cut it into a 30 that works because we couldn't afford a 60. That was part of it too. But we just knew in our gut that it wasn't the best it could be. And good on the client, like what a brave client, right? To sort of go, okay.
Yeah. I trust you.
I trust you, and we'll go make another one, which we did. So yeah, incredible client trust, which is critical to doing great work. But ultimately, I think all the best creative decisions I've made in my career have been driven by my gut, not by research or not by someone else's opinion, or been driven by my own visceral gut reaction to an idea. And intuition, as you say. Yeah.
And do you think that's just gained through experience, or have you always trusted your gut?
Yeah, I find this question really hard to answer. I get asked it quite a bit. Can you teach intuition? I think that ultimately you can get better at it. And I've seen people get better at it with experience. Ultimately, I would say that in my career, I've seen some people who just have a natural sort of ability, if you like, or just sort of maybe a bit more in touch with their sort of creative intuition than other people. And I think, but those that don't have that natural ability, I have seen people get better at it and get more experienced at it and learn to trust it more. I think you
Yeah.
can improve it.
Yeah. Were you an artist or a creative kid growing up? Like, did that have anything to do
No,
with it, or you just?
not at. I'd actually say not at all.
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of interesting. I'm married to an art director, and she is 100 times more creative than me, right? So yeah, I don't know. I don't think as a kid I was overly creative. What I learned pretty early on in advertising was I was good at spotting ideas. What I was really good at was building on ideas. Ideas are kind of scary, yeah. I think a lot of people have a sort of natural inclination to kill them, frankly, as opposed to a natural inclination to build on them and give them energy and nurture them. And I think I sort of had this kind of innate ability to do that. As I worked in advertising longer and longer, I just sort of realized that was a real strength of mine and something that I really loved. It wasn't, I wouldn't say as a kid, it was there at all, really. I just
Yeah.
played a lot of sport and rode
Yeah.
my BMX, you know?
Well, there's hope for those that want to climb the ranks to either head of an agency or CMO, which is good. Now, so you've moved client side a little while ago. What have you found most unexpected about your move to client side?
Well, I would say how liberating it is. In some ways, you expect the opposite, right? You expect, well, you've gone from this really creative environment, this really fast environment of an agency, and then you've gone to a big corporate environment. So you expect it would be the opposite of liberating. You expect it would be constricting and sort of hard to be creative and but it's the opposite. I find it incredibly liberating because for 20 years in advertising, I was making recommendations to marketers, and invariably those marketers would do what I didn't believe was the right thing. Not all the time, but most of the time, I'd say. And so I was getting pretty frustrated, and I started thinking, well, what if I could make those decisions? What if I could set the vision for the brand and then actually execute on that vision? And so that was what sort of drove me to move from agency side to client side, and that has played out big time. So it's so liberating for me to be able to go, okay, that's the idea right there, and then start immediately switch gears into, okay, now how can we make that idea the best it can possibly be, and know that I can make it happen. Like, you know, I can create the conditions for that idea to thrive, and I find that so liberating to be able to say yes to ideas and to be able to put those ideas into the world. I find it incredibly liberating, and it just makes my job so
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience, different timing in my career, but started agency land in a small brand design firm and did a lot of work with clients for all different industries and had the same frustration. Sometimes you'd put forward a brand or a logo or a positioning and the client would, not be brave enough to take that or knock it back and create media and marketing plans you'd put over, and some would get off the ground and some wouldn't. But then, going client side and going, I own this and I can work with a team of agency partners to deliver this was
Yep.
incredibly liberating. And now coming back to consulting, it's been liberating in different ways as well. So pros and cons of each side. Talked about some of what's been rewarding, I guess, that ownership from end to end and working with the different partners to make it happen and using that strength of building on ideas to make them better and take them further.
Yep.
What have you found most challenging about the transition?
Well, I think the cultural shift has been challenging. So the thing I loved most about agencies was the variety. So one day I'd be talking to a beer brand, and I'd be talking to a bank, and then I'd be talking to a tech company, and then I'd be talking, like the variety is unbelievable in agencies. And what you end up as an agency person, particularly one who's running an agency, you end up with, I'd say, small amounts of knowledge about lots of things. Like you're just such a generalist. And so for me, the shift to now you do one category, one brand. Well, I do more than one brand, but one category and just these brands, day in, day out. I found that really challenging. So the good thing is you get to go so much deeper. Like you get to go really deep on the business and the brand and your understanding of it. But I miss the variety and the change and the sort of dynamic nature of being an HC. And then, of course, the other thing that comes with corporates is all sorts of structures, processes, risk and compliance.
Yeah, especially in an insurance firm, I imagine.
Especially in financial services,
Yeah,
especially in insurance. So, and that stuff is very alien if you've come from a much smaller, nimbler business like an agency, and it just takes a while for you to get your head around it all. But again, I come back to my answer to the previous question: the incredible liberation I feel at being able to say yes to ideas and make ideas happen kind of makes all that other stuff worth it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you've still got a few brands to play with, and it looks like you've been innovating with different ways to go to market and different products and services and helping the business go in a new direction, I guess, which is how you get some of that creativity released and get some of that variety. So we've talked about some of the strengths you've brought from agency land. Anything else, like what do you think has uniquely positioned you to be successful in your role as CMO thanks to your career in agency land?
Well, we've obviously talked about creativity, right? So I think you have a passion for ideas that becomes really infectious. You put that sort of creative energy and passion into a corporate, it's really infectious. I think that's a given, right? But I think the two that I'd probably maybe underestimated a little bit, one is I think agency people are incredible simplifiers. And I think especially so I grew up in advertising when we made 30-second ads and billboards, right? Like you just had to simplify it all down. It was all about a single-minded proposition, and it's kind of what we did. It's changed a bit now because now people are building omni-channel digital experiences across the customer journey. It's a little bit less a single-minded. But agency people are really good at going into these really complex worlds, like big corporates like financial services, and finding simplicity within that complex system and being able to serve things up in a way that are not only have a lot of clarity and are super understandable, but are actually really powerful because they just have such simplicity and sort of clarity to them. So I think that's a skill set that you learn in agencies that's really, really powerful. And I think the second one, because I was always an account guy in agencies, so I was always still dealing with clients and building relationships. And so I think the sort of stakeholder management and ability to influence, I think agency people are really, really good at that. And I think, again, it's easy to kind of underestimate that because that's essentially what you spend a huge amount of your time inside a corporate doing is managing stakeholders. And I think if you have a skill in that space, you have a lot more influence and you're able to get support for what you're trying to do. And if you put those two things together, like simplicity and influence, then what's really interesting is everyone in the organization understands what you're trying to do. And in big complex organizations, I think that's really powerful to have that sort of singularity of focus. So yeah, I would say they're two skills that have served me really, really well that I learned in agencies. And the thing too, Ty, is I wouldn't change growing up in agencies. I really think growing up in agencies have so sort of made me the person I am and given me the skills that I think are essential to me being good as a CMO. So I wouldn't ever change that. I'm so glad I grew up in agencies.
Just the pace of learning's steep in agencies, isn't it? Where you are across so many categories, so many different campaigns versus, within client side where you might be jumping roles every 2 to 3 years.
And you also get pushed into situations quite young and quite inexperienced agencies that are actually way beyond capability. But you just
give it a go.
Sink or swim, right? You give it a go and you learn real fast in those sorts of situations.
Fantastic. And anything you've found that you've either needed to unlearn from your agency career or upskill to be a more successful CMO?
Yeah, look, I definitely think that it's really important if you want to be a successful CMO you need equal amounts of creativity and commercial acumen. And I think being able to balance those two things is really good. It's a left and right brain job. And I think what's good about agencies is definitely if you're running one, you do get really commercial in terms of understanding a P&L and understanding how to manage costs and all that sort of stuff because you just have to. But it's probably understanding the more complex commercial arrangements, if you like, in these big companies because the agency business is a real simple business. it's a real simple business to run from a P&L point of view. And you take a massive insurance company like ours, it's a very complex business to run. And so being able to understand that sort of complex commercial environment, I think, is something that you really have to hone, if you like, when you enter these sort of roles. It takes a little while, and certainly for the first 3 months, it felt like a fire hose of jargon coming at me that I didn't understand. But if you put the time in, if you listen, if you seek counsel from people who are, there are so many people at IAG who are way smarter at insurance than I'll ever be. And I think if you just approach it with that humility and go, look, I know what I'm good at, but they're really good at this stuff, and just be prepared. Yeah, be prepared to sort of have some humility and learn from them. It gets really interesting, because they actually, an actuary thinks about things very differently than how I think about things. But great solutions come from the diversity of thinking, right? And so I think that's been really important, is learning from people who are very, very different from me and who have a very, very different skill set to me. But they've got something to offer you. They've got something to teach you.
Oh, for sure. And obviously, when they took you on, they knew your background. So they would be open to help you learn those things to be successful in your role.
When people say to me, why'd you take the job? I say, well, because they offered it to me.
Yeah.
So
they knew what they were getting, right?
I'm not a traditional financial services marketer by any stretch. So I think they sort of knew what they were getting. And for me, I thought, well, great. That means they want creativity, they want change, and they sort of buy into, what I'll bring to the role. So yeah.
Yeah. And on that kind of governance, is there much red tape to get an ad out within financial services to tick the boxes and make sure it's?
Look, of course, we're a massive financial services company, but again, I think it's just about understanding the system, understanding the stakeholders, and just making sure that you manage them well. And the best thing is, they're pretty simple principles, right? Like, no surprises. Bring people on a journey early. Say we've got an incredible strike rate in my team of protecting the integrity of the ideas that we are making. So I think most of our stuff gets shaped along the way, but I don't think it gets majorly changed on the way, because we really take the time to make sure we understand strategically what we're trying to do, understand the idea, and then making sure that we're really clear on what we need to be thinking about when we execute. If you think about that stuff at the end, that's where the problems are, right? If you think about, if you think about the legal concerns or the risk factors, once you've made it, that's a bit dumb. What you want to do is, before you shoot it, make sure you understand all those concerns so that you can then execute accordingly. So, I think it's just being smart about how you manage it through the process, how you protect idea. I mean, I think one of my most important jobs is I need to protect ideas within a very complex corporate organization. But I have to protect those ideas, and I spend a lot of time protecting those ideas. I shepherd them through the organization. That's part of my role. But they do need protection, and they do need shepherding. Yeah, it's a big part of the role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said earlier, that simplicity and the internal positioning which you have to have with the rest of the executive and the rest of the team, and that stakeholder management. So obviously playing critical roles in helping you do that. So I might now switch to the team. So yeah, we might dive into some of the differences between managing a creative agency versus an in-house team. And maybe tell us about how you've structured your marketing team at IAG and how that's changed since when you got there.
Yeah, so when I took the role 4 years ago, IAG had a very devolved structure when it comes to marketing. So in other words, each business kind of had its own marketing team. And so my first sort of task, if you like, was bring that together into one centralized marketing team and function. So it was a big bang kind of change where I had to bring 4 teams together and form a new team. But what was really clear to me was that we had to structure things very differently to how a team would normally be structured. And what I mean by that is, like, I spent a lot of time in the States working with some of the best brand management companies in the world, Procter & Gamble, General Mills, like, who are just, brand management is at the core of what those companies do. And I thought, I think we need a brand management function like that. We need to actually manage our brands the way that some of those big consumer companies would. And we've got to be brand first. We absolutely have to be brand first, because normally insurance companies are probably product first, but we wanted to be brand first. So the first thing I said was, right, at the center of the marketing function, we need awesome brand management. But then to make that brand management, the very best it could be, or to say it differently, to manage those brands in a modern world, I think it was really clear to me you need to have a couple of capabilities that sort of supercharge that brand management, if you like. And the first one was brand strategy, because again, 20 years working in agencies, I didn't once come across a marketing team that had as good a strategic capability as the agencies, which I find baffling. So I thought, I want an agency style strategy team on the inside. So I hired agency planners and strategists, creative strategists. I hired media connections planners, trying to get like really good strategic thinking on the inside, not to replace what our agencies do, but to give our agencies the best briefs they've ever had, and to be able to partner with our agencies to make sure that the work we develop is incredibly strategic, basically. So brand strategy. And then the second piece, which I think is so critical, is a great content capability. So I don't think you can be outsourcing your content as a marketing team. You've got to be making stuff yourself. Not all of it. I'm a huge and passionate advocate of the role of agencies, as you'd expect in my background. But I think you've got to have a team of makers inside your marketing team. And what I thought was critical for that function was, I didn't want it to be run by a marketer. I wanted it to be run by someone who had more of a media and publishing background, who understands the idea that a publishing mindset, we publish every day. We're going to be editorially driven, not marketing plan or campaign driven. We need to respond to what's going on in culture. We've built an incredible content team, which has got people from the TV world, from great social media capability, like a really kind of interesting group of people. And they've just elevated our content game unbelievably. And one of the biggest sort of competitive advantages I think we've got is we're in a very low involvement category called insurance, but we have incredibly high engagement, particularly in social media, because of the quality of content we create, but also the strategic thinking that goes into our social media and content. So it's been an absolute game changer. So I've kind of built the whole structure around that idea. I think there are three capabilities that really matter: brand management, brand strategy, and content.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of the digital and the martech and the analytics, where does that fall under?
So we have some of it in our team, and we rely on other teams at IAG to provide other bits. The personalized marketing capability is really important. We're a big insurance company with a lot of customers. So, and we need to think about how we can personalize experiences to those customers. So within the content team, there's a strong personalized marketing team, and they're obviously absolutely driven by martech capability, because you need the martech capability to be able to deliver the personalized stuff. So that sort of sits in there. But when it comes to deciding which martech platform should we use, that sits in our group tech team, because they're the experts when it comes to that. We execute on the platforms that they help us, determine which are the right ones and whatever. And also with analytics, we've got a separate analytics team. Again, being an insurance company, we've got unbelievable analytics capability, as you can imagine. And so why try and build something in marketing when there's already something awesome there? So we just expertise when we need it, and it works really well. We're just working across functional way, collaborative way, and it works fine. It doesn't all need to sit in one team.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know you've made some interesting comments around customer centricity, and a lot of organizations copying each other and becoming a bit customer generic. But how and where does CX sit within that? And do you outsource that, or do you have any kind of in-house human-centered designers, or how does that? Where does that?
Yeah, fit? Again, we've got that, and that sits in a separate customer team, and we work closely with them. But so, for example, we've just been working recently on how we completely transform the onboarding experience for NRMA customers, and something we're going to be launching in a couple of months. It's really great. It's we've gone from a handful of touch points and like 2 bits of static creative to thousands of touch points and thousands of different personalized versions of creative, and like it's really cool. And it understands that if you come to our brand through the digital channel, then you need a very different onboarding solution than someone who's coming through the branch channel. And it recognizes your relationship with us. If you're taking your 8th policy out with us, you should have a very different experience for that 8th policy than someone who's coming to us for the very first time. So it just uses sort of personalization to create those different experiences. To build that, we've needed all sorts of CS capability out of the customer team. We've needed all sorts of analytics capability and data capability. We've needed all sorts of tech capability. So we just work in a really collaborative way, and we bring in the skill sets we need from across the business. We're definitely leading it in marketing because ultimately it's a brand experience. We just draw on the experience we need when we need it. So CX doesn't sit in my team. It sits in another team, but we work very closely with them because they deliver the brand promise day in, day out. And it's really important that we are aligned.
Wow, there's been a lot covered in this interview so far. As a marketing leader, we know you like to spend more time taking action and less time taking notes. So we've got you covered. We packaged up all the tips, strategies, and resources from each episode into some beautifully crafted notes just for you. Not ugly AI-generated transcripts, but real notes taken by a real person on our team. To grab the notes, head on over to growthgenerators.io, look out for this podcast episode, and download the notes. But be quick, they're only live for a few weeks after the episode airs. Now, back to the show.
So we've talked about some of the capabilities you've built in the team in terms of roles, but are there any other competencies you've been trying to build in the team, and how have you gone about that?
I think the biggest competency that we've worked really, really hard on is effectiveness. And that probably sounds unusual to say that's a competency, but I believe it is. I believe being really good at marketing effectiveness is critical, because I think where so many marketers fall down is their ability to explain to the leadership of the company, the board, or even the broader organization, how what they're doing is working. So we've built like a team that just does effectiveness. It sits in our strategy team, and that they are spending all their time building that narrative around how's our marketing working, making sure we have the right metrics in place. And we've got a fantastic dashboard that each month shows what we're delivering through the whole funnel. Also making sure, at the end of each campaign, we do a really good PIR and really understand what worked, what didn't, what we can improve. But also there is so much literature out there now on marketing effectiveness. I mean, if I think about when I started the business to now, there's probably 100x how much more effectiveness literature we've got and how much deeper our understanding is. So also making sure that we're really across all the latest developments in that space, and that we're working with some of the leading thinkers in that space, like Dr. Karen Nelson-Field, who's amazing, we work with, and just so make sure we're working with the real thought leaders and that they're helping us think about the way we do marketing so that's the most effective way possible. So I think it's critical, and we've really put a lot of time and effort into it.
Yeah. And what kind of roles have you hired into that? Are they marketing ops roles, or are they more coming in brand, or are they media, or what?
Interesting. We've kind of got an interesting mix in there. So we need people with good data capabilities. We've got a fantastic, the guy we call our effectiveness lead has more of a sort of data background, because that's core to it. We also have a role where we got someone straight out of academia who'd been doing a lot of sort of research in the space, and gave them a permanent role with us, and just sort of said, keep doing that, stay really connected to what's going on in that space, and make sure that we are across the latest learnings. We've got people in there, we've got like a researcher in there who knows how to do research, because we do our own mental availability tracking, for instance, which not a lot of clients do. There's been a lot of written about mental availability and talked about mental availability, but we actually track it for our brands in a sort of bespoke way. So it's a real mix of skills, but we put it in the strategy team quite deliberately, because I don't think it should sit in the brand. So the brand management team are delivering all the marketing. So I think it needs to be Switzerland, right? It's got to sit a bit separate to the team who are delivering the market, so they can sort of say, well, maybe that didn't work too well,
Yeah, that's right.
So you can't have people marking their own homework, right? You need to have some people who are a little bit more objective. It's a really interesting team, and I think it's a real strength of it. I mean, we've won 3 Gold Effies in the last 2 years, and we wouldn't have won those Gold Effies without having that effectiveness capability in our team. Yeah,
no doubt. It just helps you keep on improving and learning and optimizing, which is critical for marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. And how has this changed what you insource or outsource? So obviously you built up some internal capability, but you mentioned that was so you could actually be a better client and give your agencies better. Change anything else about what you were insourcing and outsourcing?
No. So look, we did build a internal, for want of a better word, agency. It's not the right word. I'd say it's more of a sort of studio. Yeah. So we've some creative people in that team, and they're able to create all sorts of content that we need. But the important thing is that they don't create the sort of tier one content that comes from our agencies, and they don't compete with our agencies in any way. There's just a whole bunch of work that we think needs to be very joined up to the marketing team. So anything that's in the personalized space, that's data driven, where we've got lots of different sort of versions and stuff, like we just need the speed of being in very close proximity to that team, because we make a lot of stuff. But there's also a whole bunch of stuff like what it's really helped having an in-house creative capability. It's really helped elevate the internal communications at IAG, which is great. So we create a lot of the internal launch materials and internal videos, and we just bring a bit more creativity and craft to them, which I think is really important.
Yeah,
it's been great so we didn't have that before. We sort of built it, and it's definitely changed our ability to make a lot of content. But also what I love about it, I think it's changed the culture of marketing too, because we've just got more makers in the team who make stuff, and I think that's really important. I think it's dangerous when you have marketing teams that just write briefs to get other people to make stuff. It really changes the culture when actually, no, we've got people who can make stuff and get on the tools and do stuff. And it just, I think, creates a really great culture in marketing where you're makers, not just marketers.
Yeah, and empowers the team, and injects that sense of creativity and agility, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. But I think it's also really important. I think I've seen a lot of marketers think they can do it all. And I really would never try and replace what my agencies bring, because what my agencies bring are two things. Obviously, they bring fantastic ideas, and they can access creative talent that I can't. I work in an insurance company, and as much as I like to think I've built this really creative culture in marketing, I know that the really good creative people I used to work with would never work in an insurance company. Of course, access to the best creative talent, I think, is going to be hard for a lot of marketing teams. And also, we're not very good at managing that sort of talent. So whereas agencies are. And also, again, it comes back to that thing we talked about earlier. Like most of the great creative people I know want variety. They don't want to do insurance all day long. They want to do all sorts of different stuff. They want variety in their life, right? So I think it's hard to attract the best creative talent. But secondly, I think what's really, really important that agencies bring is the outside perspective. I've now been at IAG for 4 years, and I pride myself on, I think differently to everyone at IAG. But you know what? I probably think a bit more like them now than I used to when I first joined. And so I think that outside perspective from an agency, they're not too close to your business. They're not caught up in the sort of all the internal complexity that we are. And I think that gives them an incredible freshness. It gives them an incredible customer view. And I think that is to be cherished. I cherish that from my agencies.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like the saying, you can't read the label from inside the jar when you are all in the same team. Yeah.
I'm going to use that. I like that.
You lack that external perspective.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then, so how different then is in-house creative team from a culture of an ad agency?
Well, I probably think more about the total culture of our marketing team than I do about the sort of in-house creative team versus the rest of the marketing team. So I just try and create sort of one marketing culture. And I think it's really important that the in-house creative team feel a part of that broader marketing culture. And something I think a lot about, so one of my favorite sort of sayings is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I really believe that. And I think if you look at the greatest sort of companies who are like, Apple makes the greatest products the world's ever seen because Apple had a culture that was all about building the best products the world's ever seen, right? Like, I think that was all about their culture. And so I think culture is really, really critical. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what culture we're trying to build within our marketing team at IAG. And I would say, given that I'm ex-agency, and I've hired a lot of ex-agency people, it probably does feel more like an agency than it does an insurance company. And I think that's important. I think we should feel different to the rest of IAG. I think we should be more creative, and I think we should be more outward looking and all those kind of things. So we've tried to build a really kind of creative culture. And I think because I believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast, we spend as much time crafting that culture and really thinking about putting words to that culture like we would a strategy. I think that's really important. Not enough people do that, right? They sort of go, well, cultures are hard to put into words, so I kind of won't bother. But I think it's really important that you really think about like what culture you're trying to build, and then you actually clearly articulate that culture and then create some rituals that support that culture. And I think if you do those two things well, I think you can create a really strong culture that attracts and retains incredible talent, but also helps that talent achieve great things and do great work.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like the internal brand, isn't it? What's
Yeah,
the vision and mission and positioning of our brand, and what are the values that underpin it, and how are we going to bring this to life through those rituals and
absolutely.
activities? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And are there one or two things that you're doing differently, you think, to build that culture? So, yeah, what are some other rituals? So you've got the end state, or the values, and what you're trying to create. You put some narrative and some words to that. But are there any other activities to build the culture that you want that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're pretty simple things that you need to do. Like, so one thing that I definitely have taken from the agency world and brought into to our team is a really good monthly town hall with everyone on the marketing team. And we call it First Wednesday. And it happens on the first Wednesday of every month. And I think what's really important as a leader is you commit to that meeting. So I don't let any other meeting get in the way of that meeting. I never move it. I've worked for plenty of bosses that always move the team meeting because something's come up, or I've got to go see the CEO or whatever.
It's not first Wednesday or Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, here we are at third Tuesday this month.
Yeah.
Because so we work really hard to make sure that, look, it's a bit like parenting. Part of it's just turning up. So just turning up on the first Wednesday of every month consistently is part of it. But then we make sure that meeting is a real celebration of our culture. And so, things like we have a market of the month, they get to spin a silly wheel to see what prize they're going to get. And like, it's not rocket science, right? But I think it's really important to celebrate the culture and celebrate the work you're doing as well. And then we have a different meeting on the last Wednesday of every month, which is much more about the business and much more about the work we're doing, the results we're achieving. We invite the business into that meeting to talk to us. And so, first Wednesday is about culture and last Wednesday is about business. And those rituals are super consistent. And then like simple things like, you have a good stand up every single week. So you're talking about the work and you talk about the people and, and again, just ritualize that behavior. It's not kind of hard stuff, but it does make a difference. And when we do an offsite, we really do it properly. And we really think about making it an experience for our people. And so just putting a lot of thought and care and craft into the culture piece, I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, doing the work and having that consistency. Again, in previous roles, I've done similar things, the monthly catch-ups or the quarterly catch-ups, the planning and like staff nominating each other for awards or monthly pulse checks. And like I say, it's simple things, but looking back, marketers are always looking forward. We're always, what's the next campaign? We don't often stop and go, well done, awesome job. Let's celebrate that and take a moment. Okay, so a lot covered there. I'd now love to switch gears and talk about how to build powerful relationships with your extended team of agency partners. So 20 years in agency land, you've obviously got deep experience dealing with different kinds of brands and all kinds of CMOs. We mentioned earlier that trust is critical to doing impactful work, and I imagine there's a correlation between a strong partnership and impactful work. If you had to boil it down, what do you think were some of the things that you or the agency did differently with some clients to help form and build these strong relationships?
It's a great question. I actually find this question easy to answer from my current role versus what I did in agencies. So I find it easy to answer based on what I think you need to do as a marketer to build trust with your agency. And I think it's actually pretty simple, but makes a huge difference. The first thing is, I think, have a really clear creative ambition. So I think it's really important that the agency understands what your creative ambition is, what type of work do you want to do, and also spending time together to have a shared understanding of what we think great work looks like. Just spending a lot of time talking about the work, because ultimately it's what we do. And I think for me, I always want the agency to know that my creative ambition is very high. I want to do great work. And I think what's really important is if you say that, then you have to deliver on that. You have to buy some great work and put some great work in the market. And what happens when you do that, I think this really interesting thing happens inside agencies is, like, I can go to any agency and buy their time, buy head hours from their people. That's called a fee. And any client can do that, and you'll get those head hours. But if the creative team believes that there's an opportunity to make some great work on my brand, then what happens is I get this unbelievable discretionary effort from that creative team. So they start thinking about my brand, not some other brand, during their lunch break, and when they're on the train, and when they're walking the dog, and when they're in the shower, and when they're having dinner with their wife and they're meant to, or husband, and they're meant to be paying attention to that. And so what happens is all of a sudden you get all this extra thinking and effort and creativity, and it doesn't cost you a cent. So for me, being that client, the one that they believe they can do great work on, isn't about vanity and about my need to be the cool client. It's actually a commercial decision. That's a smart commercial decision for me as a CMO, right? To get all that extra effort from my agency, and ultimately I get better work out of them. So that's the first thing. Have real creative ambition, but it can't be words. Like, buy some good work. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. You want your agency to love you and do great work for you, is buy some great work. Like, I mean, it's kind of that simple. That's the first thing I say. The other thing I think is really important as a client is the idea of buying completely. Now, what I mean by that is a client told me this many years ago. I had this great client at Vodafone in New Zealand, and he said, Craig Herbison, and he said to me, the agency's always right unless they're really, really wrong. And I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, look, if the idea is off brand or off brief, or frankly, I just don't like it, I'm not going to buy it. But once I buy an idea, I then trust you to execute it. You're right. So you'll be right with the choice of director. You'll be right with the way you art direct it. You'll be right with all these choices you make. And I'm not going to tell you to do any of that. I'm just going to tell you when you're really wrong. Right. And so I go, that's super interesting. So for me, that's what I try and do. I try and buy work completely. So I can be pretty frustrating early in the process because I'm not feeling it on this idea. I think that's right. I don't. But once I buy an idea, I get out of the way and I go, right, how much money and time do you need to make this brilliant? I buy it completely, and then the agency I trust to deliver executionally. So I think that concept, because what I experienced a lot of my career was clients who half buy things, and they go, yeah, it's kind of that idea, but you got to change it.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure.
Can you combine it with that other one? And
can we put those two things together in a line? Put the line from this one on that one, and can we? Yeah, and they Frankenstein it, and it becomes you buy something completely different to what you were originally buying. And so I think the idea of buying completely is really important. I think agencies need that from their clients. And then the final thing I'd say, which is I think critically important, but not enough marketers do, is you've got to pay them well. Pay them well. Like they need to make money. They need, if you want the best talent on your business, then you got to pay agencies well. And I just see too many marketers who screw down their agencies, and I just think it's madness. I think you want your agencies to be thriving, and you want to pay them well. And I think you should prioritize paying your agencies well over paying. Like Google are doing fine; they're doing just fine. Like, but maybe the small creative agency you work with, maybe you should be giving them favorable terms, or really think about how you pay them. So I think that's really important for marketers, like pay agencies well, and really understand that if it's a true business partnership, then their business needs to thrive, which will help your business thrive.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And I wonder how much of that was shaped by your agency career, even though you're talking about current state, but knowing what those good CMOs did differently, and when they did set the bar high and gave you the freedom and didn't nitpick and allowed you to do complete work. I love that. And I also realize that in relation to not screwing down your agencies, you're a little bit different to some CMOs in that you've appointed some agencies based on the work they've done rather than go through a whole panel process.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when I first made big agency changes that I made on the roster, I appointed the Monkeys as my sort of lead brand creative agency without a pitch, and I appointed CHEP, CHE Proximity, as my sort of data-driven CX agency, also without a pitch, because I just thought they were doing the best work in the market in those two spaces. So I went and had a chat with them. There was good chemistry, good alignment on what we should do, and I hired them. It also saved me about 6 months of nonsense during a pitch. And it meant we could get on with let's start actually creating things together. And so what it gave us too was momentum, because we didn't get caught up in a big long pitch process. We actually just started making work. And that's how you really, I think, learn about the agency relationships by making some stuff together, as opposed to going through some beauty parade pitch process. Anyway, that's my personal point of view, but I think that was easier for me to do because I'd spent a lot of time in agencies, and I was pretty confident that I could pick the right agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Conscious of time, just maybe one or two more questions in this, and then get to the fast five. How important is it when you've got a roster of agency partners to help them build trust with each other, so you've got an all-star team rather than a team of all-stars?
Yeah, it's really important. And I think the important thing is, when you have a roster, is that as the client, you need to step in. You can't just sort of be like, well, you agencies, you all sort it out amongst yourselves. That never works. So you got to be really clear, I think, on, look, guys, here's each agency's role in this process. Because what you don't want to create is, you don't want to create competition or confusion when it comes to rosters. So you don't want the competition where it's like, they'll pick the best idea from amongst us. No. Let's be clear on everyone's roles. And so that's one thing. And I think the second thing is, nothing integrates like an idea. So I think once you've got an idea at the heart and you go, right, guys, this idea is really exciting. And it came from this agency over here, but that's okay. Let's put this idea in the middle and let's think about how we can all get around this idea and we can turn this into something, really awesome by bringing together the combined strengths of the roster. And I think that if you've got an agency roster who put the work first, then I think that they'll do that. I think, once you've got an idea, people get pretty excited and people can get behind it and figure out how they can kind of work with it. So they'd be my 2 points there. But I think ultimately it just comes down to, you got to be really transparent and really clear on what your expectations are for the different agencies and how you want them to work together. They're never going to work it out themselves. If you just go, you guys work that out, it's always a mess because you need that sort of real clarity on how the agency is going to work together. I think it's important.
And do you bring them all together for planning days or?
Yeah, we bring them together for planning days. Yeah. What we do, which is great, is before we go live with an integrated campaign, we have what we call an end-to-end session. But basically, we put all the work up on one wall and we get all our agencies together and they each present their part of the campaign and we see the whole thing and how it plays out. And it's the most energizing meeting I go to. Every month I get so excited because I get to see all the work and how everyone's sort of worked really well together to build it, and it works really, really well. It's not easy, but I think ultimately, for me anyway, I love that diversity of thought you get from having a few different agencies rather than sort of having it all in one place. I think that diversity of thought's really important.
Yeah. Fantastic, Brent. Well, obviously achieved a lot already, won a number of Effies. You've turned around the NRMA brand from 36th strongest brand in Australia to number 3rd and number 1 insurance brand globally. What are you most looking forward about into the future?
Well, look, I always get excited with having 2 or 3 pieces of work in front of me that I'm really excited to make. And so it's always my thing. I need 2 or 3 things I'm really excited to make. And I've got those right now. I've got probably more than 2 or 3 things that we're really excited to make. So I always get excited about the work that's about to be made and about to happen. And it's always been a big focus of my career. But to be honest, when you say, what am I excited about in the future? I'm really excited about this group of marketers I've currently got working for me. And I see just some incredible talent. And I'm so excited to sort of watch them grow. And I believe they'll be future leaders in marketing. And I just hope that I'm able to sort of teach them a few things about marketing, teach them a few things about leadership, teach them a few things about creativity that they sort of can take with them and can help them become this sort of next generation of marketing leaders that we really need, who are going to make Australian business more creative and more, and bring a real growth mindset. And I just, that really excites me, that like, could I sort of help set them up for future success? I get really excited about that.
Yeah. Is one of the most rewarding parts of being a leader, isn't it? Seeing how far your staff can go. And it sounds like you're at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs there. And they're thinking about others, Brent, which is great. Now, are you ready for our Fast Five?
I think so.
What do you believe are 3 essential capabilities or criteria of a high-performance marketing team?
Creativity, strategy, and delivery.
Sounds good. Makes sense. And how would you describe your marketing team's culture in one word?
Significant. So we want to be Australia's most significant marketing team that is doing the most significant work.
Love it.
That's how we define our culture.
Setting the ambition high. And what is one metric that you've successfully used to track and measure team performance?
Brand momentum is my favorite metric.
Yeah. What does that look like?
So I have a very binary belief when it comes to brands and momentum. You've either got it or you haven't. And there are a lot of brands that are clinging to past momentum as opposed to actually doing it. So it's real simple for me. What's brand momentum look like? Number one, are you adding more customers than you're losing? Number two, are more people leaning forward and engaging with your brand each month? So that might be through search, social, there's different ways to measure that. But I think, that's really important, that idea of like more people are wanting to be part of this brand. So I think it's brand momentum. I think it's this really interesting idea, and I want my brands to have momentum. And ultimately, I think it's the one metric to rule them all, I'd say, is brand momentum.
Love that. Heard of that one before. And what is one skill or capability you've learned recently that you wish you'd developed much sooner in your career?
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Okay. I think you learn over time, and it takes a lot of skill to build, doesn't it?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah. And what book or books have you read that you found yourself recommending to others, or you think our audience may gain benefit from?
Yeah, look, so I don't normally read business books. I prefer, if I'm going to read, I'd prefer reading a novel or something. But one I really enjoyed was Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Disney. His book, I think it's called The Ride of a Lifetime or something like that. But what's really interesting, he's the guy that took over Disney. I mean, Disney's only had like 5 CEOs ever since like Walt. And he's the guy that bought Pixar, bought Marvel, bought Lucasfilm, and has completely sort of transformed a company that was already pretty unbelievable, and he's taken it to the next level. And why I love it is he calls himself a creative leader. Like, he leads one of the most creative companies in the world. And there's a lot in there, I think, for people who want to lead in the creativity space. The other one, which is, I think, the Bible for brand builders. So there's a new Nike book that's come out, and it's by Faden, who make all the sort of arty, fashiony coffee table books. But they've done a Nike book, and it's it's all about the Nike brand and the Nike culture, and it's the Bible for brand builders. It's unreal.
I love, there was a design show on Netflix, and it was about the shoe designer that designed a lot of the Nike shoes, and that was
I saw that. I saw that, my son. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So I'll have to check out that book, and I'll put both of those in the show notes if anyone's interested with those. Well, Brent, thanks so much for coming on the show. Fascinating to hear about your journey, both agency career and the amazing success you had with that, the top 50 Super Bowl ads of all time, and then the transition to CMO and the kind of learnings and findings you brought along that and how you're building rock solid relationships with your partners by setting the bar high, buying the work completely, and building that trust and empowering them to deliver the great work, as well as how you're building the culture of the team. So lots of takeaways for our listeners there. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ty. Thank you for all the kind words. And it was really fun. Cheers.
Yeah, welcome.
You've been listening to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes. If you love the show, please remember to hit subscribe so that you can discover more tips and strategies to build a high-performance marketing team. And if you're feeling generous, please tell someone about the show who you think would benefit. We're on a mission to help CMOs build their dream team and enable marketers to do their best work. And we appreciate your help in spreading the word.